My reflection is aging faster than I am. I noticed it in the mirror one morning when I was brushing my teeth. It wasn't dramatic. No lightning, no sudden horror, movie sting. Just something off. You know that feeling when you see a photo of yourself and it doesn't match how you feel inside, like your face is slightly wrong. Like it belongs to someone who looks like you but isn't you. It was like that. Except this time the photo was live, breathing, moving when I moved. I leaned closer to the mirror. The bathroom light buzzed overhead. The kind of cheap light that makes everyone look a little sick. There was a thin line near my eye, a crease that hadn't been there yesterday. Not a wrinkle, not yet, but the suggestion of one, like my reflection was rehearsing for old age. I smiled at myself. My reflection smiled back, but it felt late, not delayed like bad internet, late like it had hesitated. I laughed it off. Everyone gets paranoid in the morning. Bad sleep, dry eyes, too much screen time. I splashed water on my face, wiped the mirror with my sleeve, and the moment passed, at least. I thought it had. Let me be honest with you up front, because I wish someone had been honest with me when this started. This isn't a story about vanity. I'm not obsessed with youth. I don't fear wrinkles or gray hair. This is about watching time move differently for the person who lives inside the glass. And about what it does to you when you realize you and your reflection are no longer aging together. If you've ever stared at yourself too long in a mirror and felt disconnected, like you were looking at a stranger who happened to be wearing your face, you'll understand the kind of unease I'm talking about. Because once you notice it, you can't stop noticing it. It started small. The line near my eye became two. My reflection's eyes looked a little more tired than mine felt. The skin under its jaw sagged just a bit more than it should have. I checked photos of myself, recent ones. My face looked fine, normal. The same face I'd had for years, but the mirror told a different story. I did something stupid. I started testing it. I smiled wide. The reflection smiled, but the smile looked strained, like it had to stretch further to reach the same shape. I raised my eyebrows. The skin on my reflection's forehead creased deeper than my own skin did when I touched it. I pressed my fingers to my cheek and watched the reflection do the same. We moved together, perfectly synchronized, but the face it was wearing didn't feel like mine anymore. It looked like my future, and not a future I recognized. Not gentle aging, not natural change. This was accelerated, condensed, like someone had taken 10 years of slow decay and folded it into weeks. I started avoiding mirrors. That sounds dramatic, but you'd be surprised how easy it is to pretend reflective surfaces don't exist. You learn where the glass is. You look past windows. You brush your teeth with your eyes down. You walk by shop fronts without seeing your own shape in them. But reflections are sneaky. They wait for you. One night, I caught my reflection in the dark screen of my phone. Just for a second. The room was dim, the screen black, and my face hovered there like a ghost. Older, more hollow. I dropped the phone, like it had burned me. At this point, I was still trying to explain it away. Stress, lighting, sleep deprivation, the way your brain can trick you when you're already uneasy. So I did what people do when they're scared but don't want to admit it. I asked someone else. My sister came over one afternoon. We sat on the couch, the window behind us throwing pale light across the room. I turned to her and said, casually, like I was talking about the weather. She frowned. Different how? Older, tired. I don't know, just off. She studied my face for a long moment. Not the quick glance people give when they're trying to be polite. A real look, the kind that makes you feel seen. You look the same, she said. Maybe you're just burnt out. That should have been comforting. It wasn't. Because when I stood up and walked into the hallway, I caught my reflection in the long mirror by the door. And the person in the glass looked older than my sister. Not by a little. By years. Here's the part that still messes with me when I try to explain it. My reflection wasn't just aging. It was learning. Its expressions grew heavier. The way it looked at me changed. At first, it just mirrored me. Then it started to look tired before I felt tired. Then it started to look sad before I felt sad. Like it was living through things ahead of me. Like it had already been where I was going. There were mornings I'd wake up feeling fine, even hopeful. I'd walk into the bathroom, and my reflection would look devastated. Eyes dull, mouth slack with some quiet grief I didn't recognize yet. It felt like seeing the end of a movie before the beginning had even finished. You know that feeling when someone looks at you with pity and you don't know why. That was the look my reflection started giving me, pity. I started talking to it. Not because I thought it would answer, just because silence felt worse. Why do you look like that? I whispered one night, the bathroom light off, the mirror barely catching my outline. My reflection whispered back, not with words, with a look. It tilted its head the same way I did, but its eyes were older eyes. Eyes that had seen something I hadn't. There was a moment, a long, quiet moment, where I had the insane thought that it was waiting for me to catch up, like it was already at the end of my life, watching me crawl toward it in real time. I backed away from the mirror, heart pounding, and didn't turn the light on. Sleep became hard after that, not because I was tired, but because every time I closed my eyes, I imagined my reflection continuing without me. Aging alone in the dark, growing older while I stayed the same. I started to dream about mirrors. In the dreams, I'd look into them and see a version of myself that was ancient, skin paper thin, eyes sunken, mouth moving like it was trying to speak, but no sound came out. Sometimes the reflection would smile. Sometimes it would look relieved. Sometimes it would look angry. I woke up with my heart racing. The image of my own face burned into my mind like a warning. Here's something I haven't said out loud until now. Part of me didn't feel afraid. Part of me felt replaced. Like the person in the mirror was becoming more real than the person standing in front of it. I'd catch myself checking the mirror not to see my own face, but to see what it looked like now, how much older it had gotten, what new damage time had done to it. It felt like tracking a disease. And then, one morning, I noticed something I can't unsee. My reflection blinked, and I didn't. It was just a fraction of a second. The smallest slip, but in that moment, I knew the rules had changed, because reflections aren't supposed to move on their own. Part 2. When the mirror starts looking back after the reflection blinked without me, I stopped pretending this was a stress thing. There are moments in your life where your brain runs through every excuse it has left, burns through them all in about half a second, and then just gives up, like a computer hitting a fatal error and shutting down. That's what it felt like. I stood there in the bathroom, one hand gripping the edge of the sink so hard my knuckles went pale, staring at a face that was supposed to be mine. It stared back. We were still, perfectly still. I raised my hand slowly, testing it. The reflection matched me. Good. Still following the rules. But the damage was done. Because now I knew the rules could break, I turned the light off. The mirror didn't go dark right away. There was a soft delay. The room went black, and my reflection lingered for a heartbeat longer, like an afterimage burned into glass. In that last moment before it vanished, I could have sworn its mouth twitched. Not a smile. Not a frown. Something like relief. From that night on, I covered the bathroom mirror. Not with something heavy, just a towel, thin enough that I could still see the vague shape of myself behind it if I stood close, like a ghost trapped under fabric. The problem with hiding from something is that it makes it louder in your head. I started to feel watched even when there was no mirror around. Like the version of me in the glass was still there, still aging, still moving forward along a timeline I couldn't see. I tried not to think about it. That lasted maybe a day. There's a trick people use when they're trying to feel in control. They set up rules. I decided I would only look at my reflection once a day, same time, same mirror, same lighting. If I kept the conditions consistent, I could track what was happening instead of letting it ambush me. It felt scientific, it felt calm, it was neither. Every night at exactly 10:30, I'd stand in front of the hallway mirror, the long one by the door, the one that showed my whole body, top to bottom. The first night, my reflection looked about 5 years older than me. The second night, it looked closer to 10. The lines were deeper, the posture slightly more stooped. The eyes had that faraway look people get when they've lived through too much and don't expect things to get easier anymore. The third night I noticed something new. Scars. Small ones, thin white lines on the hands, on the forearms. Marks I didn't have. Yet, I touched my skin where the reflection had scars. Nothing but the reflection touched its own arm in the same place. And its fingers trembled. That was when the fear shifted into something heavier. Not panic, dread. Because aging is one thing. Scars mean experience. And experience means time. Events, things happening. It meant the reflection wasn't just aging faster. It was living a life. A version of my life. Ahead of me. I started keeping notes. Not because I wanted to. Because I was scared I'd forget what I saw. Night 1, deeper lines around eyes. Night 2, hairline receding. Night 3, scar on left forearm. I wrote like a witness giving a statement to no one. One night, I noticed the reflection's right hand shaking a tremor. Subtle, but there. The next day my own hand was steady. I held it out in front of me. Stared at it, flexed my fingers. Nothing. The reflection watched me do it. Its eyes were sad. I don't know how to describe what it feels like to see your future self look afraid of you. Not afraid in the way someone flinches from a threat. Afraid in the way someone looks at a person they know is about to make a mistake they can't stop, like watching a car drift toward a cliff in slow motion. I started to wonder what it knew that I didn't, what it had already lived through, and whether it was trying to warn me or warn itself. One night, I spoke out loud. "I see you," I said, my voice barely louder than the hallway light. The reflection didn't respond with words, but its eyes focused in a way they hadn't before, not just mirroring me, seeing me. "I don't know what you are," I whispered, "but you're not just me, are you?" The reflection opened its mouth. No sound came out, but I could read its lips. "Don't." I stumbled back from the mirror, my heart slamming against my ribs. "Don't what? Don't look." Don't ask, don't become what you are. The reflection closed its mouth and looked away, like it had already said too much. After that, the reflection started changing faster, not just older, heavier. There was a weight to it. The shoulders slunked more. The eyes dulled. The mouth pulled down at the corners like it had forgotten how to rest in a neutral shape. One night, I noticed dried blood under its fingernails. My stomach twisted. The next morning, I woke up with clean hands. But I couldn't shake the image. Blood doesn't come from nothing. It comes from something happening. Something that hadn't happened to me yet. I started dreading the mirror checks, but I couldn't stop. It was like watching a slow-motion accident. You know it's going to get worse, but not watching feels worse somehow. At least if I looked, I could prepare. At least I could brace myself for the shape of what was coming. The reflection began to show signs of illness, sunken cheeks, a hollowed-out look under the eyes. Skin that looked thinner, stretched tighter over bone. One night, it leaned closer to the glass than I did. It broke the symmetry. Just a little. I froze. My reflection's face was inches from the surface of the mirror. So close, I could see the texture of its skin, the tiny cracks in its lips. It raised its hand. I raised mine. Our palms lined up on opposite sides of the glass. For a second, I swore I felt warmth, not through the mirror, in my chest. Like some part of me recognized it, I started noticing things in my life that felt pre-worn. Moments that felt like echoes instead of experiences. A conversation with a stranger that felt familiar before it happened. A sudden wave of sadness with no clear cause. A sense of grief that didn't belong to any memory I had. It was like my body was picking up emotional debris from a future it hadn't lived yet. And the reflection was carrying all of it. One night, I noticed something on the reflection's neck. A thin, angry red line, like a mark left by a cord. Or a hand my throat went dry. I touched my own neck, smooth, unmarked. The reflection met my eyes, and for the first time its expression wasn't sad. It was urgent. It mouthed words again. This time I caught them. Not that way. I shook my head. I don't know what you're trying to tell me. The reflection's jaw clenched. The muscles in its face tightened, like it was forcing itself not to scream. It pressed its forehead to the glass. I did the same. Two versions of the same person, separated by a thin layer of silvered glass in a growing gulf of time. Here's what I think, and I could be wrong. I think the reflection isn't aging faster. I think it's aging normally, and I'm the one who's frozen, not in time. In experience, I think something has split the timeline of my life into two overlapping tracks. One version of me keeps living, keeps getting hurt, keeps moving towards something heavy and final. The other version of me has been stalled, protected, or delayed, and the mirror is the only place the two versions can see each other. The scariest part isn't what the reflection looks like now. It's what it will look like soon. Because if the pattern holds, the next changes won't just be lines and scars. They'll be signs of endings. And whatever is waiting for that version of me at the end of the line, it's coming for me too, just slower, like a shadow that doesn't move at the same speed as the body casting it. Let's go deeper. Here's part 3. This is where the story stops being just unsettling and starts to bend in on itself. Things get darker, more tragic, and the line between me and the reflection begins to break. When the mirror stops obeying, there's a specific kind of fear that doesn't feel like panic. It feels quiet, like something heavy settling in your chest, and deciding it's not leaving. That's what I felt the first time my reflection didn't follow me. It was subtle, small enough that I almost missed it. I raised my hand. The reflection raised its hand too, but the timing was wrong. Not late, early, by just a fraction of a second. I froze, my arms still in the air. The reflection's hand hovered, already up, already waiting for mine to catch up. I slowly lowered my arm. The reflection lowered its arm with me. But again, just a hair too soon. It wasn't copying me anymore. It was anticipating me. My stomach turned cold. I stood there for a long time, barely breathing, testing tiny movements, a tilt of the head, a shift of weight. The reflection stayed perfectly in sync with where I was going, not where I had been. It felt like looking at a video of myself that was recorded a few seconds in the future, like my own body was lagging behind a version of me that had already decided what to do. "Stop," I whispered. The reflection's mouth formed the word stop before mine did. That's when the quiet fear cracked open into something louder. I stepped back from the mirror. The reflection stepped back too, but then it did something wrong. It didn't stop when I stopped. It took one more step. Just one, and then it froze, as if it had realized the mistake. The distance between us grew by the length of that extra step. It wasn't much, but it was everything, Gunite. Because that step wasn't mine, I left the apartment that night. I didn't grab a coat, didn't check the weather, didn't lock the door. I just walked. Cold air burned my lungs. The city lights blurred into streaks as I moved. Every reflective surface felt like a trap. Windows, cars, dark puddles on the sidewalk. I kept my eyes down. But even in the corner of my vision, I could feel it. The sense that the reflection was still there, still moving, still ahead of me. I ended up sitting on a bench in a park I hadn't been to in years. The trees were bare, branches reaching up like fingers caught in mid-plea. There was a thin layer of frost on the ground, crunching under my shoes when I shifted my weight. For a while, I just sat there and tried to breathe. I told myself the mirror was just glass, that reflections can't move on their own, that fear can create patterns out of noise. But the thing about patterns is that once you see them, they start seeing you back. I stared at my reflection in the dark surface of a nearby pond. The water was still enough to show my face. The reflection in the water looked wrong, not older, not scarred, just patient, like it had time. When I went back home, the mirror was uncovered. I don't remember taking the towel down. I stood in the doorway of the bathroom, the light spilling out in a soft yellow square onto the floor. The mirror was clear. Waiting, my reflection was there, older, thinner, the skin around its eyes stretched and tired. And it was already looking at me, not because it had mirrored my gaze, because it had been watching the doorway. I didn't move, neither did it. We stood like that, separated by glass and years and whatever invisible rules had finally started to rot. "You're not supposed to move first," I said. The reflection's lips pressed together. It lifted one finger slowly. Not to copy me. Toe point at my chest. My heart started to pound so hard it felt like it was trying to escape. "What?" I whispered. The reflection shook its head. Then it pointed again, harder, like it was angry with me for not understanding. Then it did something I'll never forget. It mimed pulling something out of its own chest, like dragging an invisible weight free. Its face twisted in pain as it did it. I staggered back, my breath coming too fast. "You're hurting," I said. The reflection nodded, not with relief, with exhaustion. There are moments when fear turns into something else, not courage. Responsibility. The reflection wasn't just a horror anymore. It was a warning. It was showing me the cost of whatever path I was on. The weight in its chest, the scars, the sickness. It wasn't just older, it was burdened, carrying something that was crushing it slowly. And somehow, I was the one who had put it there. I started changing small things, avoiding certain people, skipping certain places, taking different routes home. I didn't know what I was trying to prevent, just that the reflection seemed to be begging me not to walk into something it couldn't survive. Every time I altered a choice, I watched the mirror that night. At first, nothing changed. Then, slowly, I noticed the reflection's posture shift. Not straighter, not healthier. Lighter, like the weight on its chest had eased. Just a little. The scars on its arms didn't vanish. But no new ones appeared. The red mark on its neck faded to a dull line. It was still older than me, still tired, but something in its eyes softened, hope maybe, or relief. That's when I realized the worst truth of all. The reflection wasn't a warning of what would happen no matter what I did. It was a record of what would happen if I kept living the same way. It was the version of me that never changed course, the version that kept walking into the same quiet disasters. The mirror wasn't showing me the future. It was showing me the consequences. But here's the twist that still wakes me up some nights. As I changed things, as I avoided the paths the reflection seemed to fear, it started to fade. Not vanish. Then, like an image losing resolution, the more I drifted away from its timeline, the less solid it became. One night I stood in front of the mirror and saw my reflection flicker, the lines in its face blurred, the scars lost definition. Its eyes widened. It reached out, pressing both palms flat against the glass. I raised my hands to meet them. For the first time, the movements were out of sync. Not because it was ahead of me, because it was falling behind. And in that moment, I understood the final, cruel balance of it all. If I saved myself, I was erasing it. So now I'm stuck between two impossible choices. Keep living the way that leads to that broken, burdened future self, and let it exist, or change my path, save myself, and let that version of me disappear into nothing. I don't know which one is more terrifying, letting myself suffer, or killing the only proof of what that suffering becomes. That's where part 3 ends, because this is the point where the story stops being about fear of mirrors and starts being about what we owe to the versions of ourselves that carry the weight of our worst choices. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe for more stories.